Please subscribe to my channel. This is my sincere request to you. I thought I was there to bury my grandmother, but someone was there to collect me. The lawyer's warning was not about grief. It was about survival. One dark door, one stranger, and a family secret that made my stomach drop. They wanted me to sign routine paperwork. Let the fine print read like a trap. If you have ever felt your own family smiling while hiding a knife, do not blink. My name is Scarlett Chapman. I am 33 years old, and until this morning, I thought the worst thing that could happen to a person was watching the strongest woman they ever knew get lowered into the cold Colorado earth. I was wrong. The wind at the cemetery near Boulder was not just cold. It was aggressive. It whipped through the rows of headstones, tearing at the black coats of the murderers and stinging my eyes until I could not tell if the moisture on my cheeks was from grief or the gale. My grandmother, Ruth Chapman, would have hated this weather. She would have called it a nuisance, something to be scolded, until it behaved. But Ruth was inside a mahogany box now, 81 years of life silenced, and the weather was doing whatever it pleased. I stood apart from the others, hugging my coat tighter around my frame. I lived in Aurora, less than an hour away, but standing here felt like I had been transported to a different planet, a gray, airless world where the oxygen had been replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. That silence was the first thing that felt wrong. Funerals are supposed to be loud in their quietness. There should be the sound of stifled sobs, the blowing of noses, the murmuring of fond memories. But the small crowd gathered around Ruth's grave was mostly silent, and the center of that silence, the vacuum where the grief should have been loudest, was my father, Gavin Chapman, and his wife, Maris. I watched them from beneath the brim of my hat. Gavin stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his posture rigid. He was not looking at the coffin. He was looking at the horizon, his jaw working slightly, as if he were chewing on a thought he could not quite swallow. He did not look like a man burying the mother who had raised him. He looked like a man waiting for a bus that was running 5 minutes late. Beside him, Maris was a statue of performative elegance. She wore a hat with a veil that was just sheer enough to show she was not crying. Her makeup was flawless, her lipstick a shade of tasteful mauve that she had probably spent 20 minutes selecting this morning. She held Gavin's arm, not for support, but with a grip that looked possessive, like the handler restraining an animal. I took a step closer, my boots crunching softly on the frost-hardened grass. The priest was droning on about peace and eternal rest, words that felt hollow against the backdrop of the flat irons. I wanted to be closer to the casket. I wanted to say goodbye without them standing in the way. As the priest invited everyone to bow their heads, I saw Maris lean in toward my father. It was a subtle movement, barely a tilt of her head. The wind carried her voice, thin and sharp, directly to me. Just the right timing, she whispered, and everything is ours. My stomach turned over. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I looked at Gavin, expecting him to recoil, to hush her, to show some shred of decency. Instead, he just nodded. It was a microscopic nod, a single dip of the chin. And then he checked his watch. They were not mourning. They were counting down. A wave of nausea hit me, hot and sudden. I backed away, needing distance. I felt like I was witnessing a crime in plain sight. But there was no weapon, only a lack of tears and a whisper about timing. Scarlett, the voice was low and rough, like gravel shifting under tires. I jumped, spinning around. Standing in the shadow of a large oak tree was Miles Harrington. He had been my grandmother's lawyer for as long as I could remember. I recalled him as a boisterous man who used to bring me peppermint candies when I was a child. Now he looked like a ghost of himself. His skin was gray, hanging loosely on his frame, and his eyes were darting around the cemetery as if he expected an ambush. "Mr. Harrington," I said, my voice trembling, "I did not see you there." He did not smile. He did not offer condolences. He stepped into my personal space, far closer than social norms allowed, and gripped my elbow with a hand that felt like a claw. "Listen to me," he hissed. His breath smelled of stale coffee and fear. "Keep your voice down. Do not look at them. But put your father, that woman." He squeezed my arm harder, almost painful. "Ruth did not die naturally. Scarlett, do not let them tell you otherwise." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What are you talking about?" The doctor said it was her heart. She was 81. The doctor signed what was put in front of him. Miles said, his words coming out in a rapid-fire whisper. Ruth knew. She suspected it was coming. She came to me 3 days before she passed. I tried to pull away, my mind reeling. This was insanity. This was grief talking. Miles was old. Maybe he was confused. Mr. Harrington, I think you should go home and rest. Do not tell Gavin, he commanded, ignoring my attempt to dismiss him. And do not tell your brother. Owen is a good kid, but he is weak. He will fold if they press him. You are the only one I can trust. He shoved a small and thick card into my hand. It was not his usual business card. It was a plain white rectangle with an address typed on it in simple black ink. No name, no phone number. Wait until everyone leaves, he said, his eyes locking onto mine with terrifying intensity. Wait until the reception is over. Wait until Gavin and Maris think you are safe in your bed. Then come to this address. Come alone. Do not bring your phone into the building. Miles, you are scaring me. You should be scared, he said grimly. Then, as quickly as he had appeared, he released me and stepped back into the shadows of the oak tree. By the time I turned to look at where my father and Maris were standing, Miles was already walking away, a solitary figure disappearing into the rows of gray stones. I looked down at the card in my hand. The address was for a building in an old industrial district on the outskirts of town, nowhere near his posh downtown law firm. I spent the rest of the funeral in a daze. I hugged relatives I barely recognized. I accepted condolences that felt like dry leaves brushing against my skin. I watched Owen, my younger brother, looking lost and pale, standing on the periphery. I wanted to run to him to tell him what Miles had said, but the lawyer's warning rang in my ears. He will fold. I watched Gavin and Maris. They were perfect. They shook hands. They nodded solemnly, but every time their eyes met, I saw that same look I had seen at the graveside. It was the look of two people who had just pulled off a heist and were waiting to split the loot. Just the right timing. The reception was at my father's house. I stayed for exactly 45 minutes. I told them I had a migraine. I told them I needed to lie down. Maris touched my shoulder, her fingers digging in slightly, her nails perfectly manicured talons. Rest up, darling, she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that made my teeth ache. We have a lot of paperwork to get through tomorrow for the estate. You know how it is. Of course, I said, forcing a weak smile. Tomorrow. I drove away with my heart hammering against my ribs. I did not go home to Aurora. I drove to a diner off the highway and sat in a booth for 3 hours drinking black coffee that tasted like battery acid, watching the sun go down and the world turned to gray and then to black. At 9 in the evening, I got back in my car. The address Miles had given me led to a part of town that city planners had forgotten. The street lights were sparse, casting long, sickly pools of yellow light on cracked pavement. The building was a 3-story brick structure that looked like it had once been a factory or a warehouse. The windows were dark. There was no sign of life. I parked my car a block away, tucked behind a dumpster just in case. I left my phone in the glove compartment, feeling a phantom limb sensation as I locked the door. Walking without it felt dangerous, but walking with it, according to Miles, was worse. The front door of the building was unlocked. It groaned as I pushed it open, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silence. The lobby was empty. There was a directory on the wall, but the letters had peeled away decades ago, leaving only ghostly outlines of businesses that no longer existed. A single bulb hung from the ceiling by a wire, swaying slightly from a draft I could not feel. I took the stairs. The elevator looked like a coffin with doors, and I was not ready to be buried yet. The second floor was a long, narrow hallway. The carpet was threadbare, smelling of dust and something metallic, like old copper pipes. There was only one light source, a sconce at the far end of the hall emitting a dim, jaundiced glow. The doors I passed were all closed. Some were boarded up, others had frosted glass panes that were dark. But at the very end of the hall, under that single flickering light, there was a door painted a deep, glossy black. It looked new, out of place against the decay of the rest of the building, and there was a man standing in front of it. I stopped dead in my tracks, my hand gripping the banister of the stairwell. He was not Miles Harrington. He was younger, perhaps in his late 40s, wearing a charcoal coat that looked expensive but rumpled. He was leaning against the wall with a deceptive casualness, his arms crossed over his chest. He was mostly in shadow, but I could see the sharp line of his jaw and the glint of eyes that were watching me with unsettling precision. He did not look like a lawyer. He looked like someone who cleaned up the messes lawyers made. I considered turning around. My flight instinct was screaming at me to run, to get back to my car, to drive until I hit the state line. But the image of Maris's smile and the echo of her whisper held me in place. Everything is ours. I took a step forward, and another. The man did not move. He just watched me come closer, his gaze heavy. When I was 10 feet away, I stopped. The silence in the hallway was thick enough to choke on. Miles said to come alone. I said, my voice sounding stronger than I felt. The man tilted his head. He pushed himself off the wall, standing to his full height. He was tall, imposing. He looked at me not with hostility, but with a weary sort of recognition. He is inside, the man said. His voice was a deep baritone, calm and level. Who are you? I asked. He ignored the question. Instead, he took a step toward me, coming into the pool of yellow light. I saw a scar running through his left eyebrow, interrupting the hair. He looked tired, the kind of tired that sleep does not fix. You look like her, he said softly. Around the eyes, I stiffened. I look like my father. No, he corrected me. You look like Ruth. He reached into his pocket. I flinched, stepping back, bracing myself. But he only pulled out a set of keys. He turned to the black door, but before he inserted the key, he looked back at me. She worried you would not come, he said. She thought you might be too afraid of Gavin to seek the truth. I am not afraid of my father, I lied. The man's lips quirked in a humorless smile. Though you are going to need that anger. He turned the key in the lock. The tumbler clicked loudly. Welcome to the real wake, Cricket, he said. My blood turned to ice. I stopped breathing. The hallway seemed to spin. Cricket. Nobody called me that. Nobody. It was a nonsense name. A silly little moniker my grandmother had given me the summer I turned 7. When I had spent 3 months at her house catching insects in the tall grass, she had never used it in front of anyone else. It was our secret code, a word she whispered when she tucked me in or signed at the bottom of birthday cards that she handed to me directly, bypassing my parents. Gavin did not know it. Maris certainly did not know it. Even Owen had never heard it. Only Ruth knew, and Ruth was dead. I stared at the stranger, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. How do you know that name? I whispered. He did not answer. He simply pushed the black door open and stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter the darkness beyond. Because she told me you were the only one who could finish what she started, he said. I looked at the open door beyond the threshold. I could smell the faint scent of old paper and the specific floral perfume my grandmother had worn for 50 years. It was a scent of comfort. But here, in this dark hallway with this stranger, it smelled like a summons from the grave. I understood then that the funeral this morning had just been a pageant. The prayers, the flowers, the polite nods. It was all theater. This was the reality. I tightened my grip on my coat, took a breath that tasted of dust and danger, and walked through the black door. One thing was certain. I was not just here to mourn my grandmother anymore. I was here to avenge her. The drive back to my father's house felt less like a return to a sanctuary, and more like a voluntary surrender to a medium-security prison. The suburbs of Boulder were draped in darkness. The large sprawling estate sitting behind manicured hedges that looked black under the moonlight. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was blazing with light. Every window was illuminated, casting long rectangular beams onto the snow-dusted lawn. It looked inviting to a stranger, a warm hearth after a cold funeral. But I knew better. It was not warmth. It was staging. I parked my car and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My meeting with the man in the dark office, Miles Harrington's associate, was still vibrating under my skin. I could still smell the dust of that hallway and hear the click of the lock. But I had to put that away. I had to bury the fear and the suspicion deep in my gut and paint a mask of exhaustion over my face. If Gavin and Maris suspected that I knew anything, that I had peeled back even one layer of their carefully constructed reality, I was terrified of what they might do. I walked up the front steps, my boots heavy. The front door opened before I could reach for the handle. Maris stood there, framed by the warm golden light of the foyer. She had changed out of her funeral blacks into a cream-colored cashmere sweater and slacks that looked soft and expensive. She looked like an advertisement for comforting domesticity, except for her eyes. They were alert, scanning my face like a barcode reader. "Scarlett, honey," she cooed, ushering me inside. "We were getting worried. You were gone for hours." "I just needed to drive," I said, letting my shoulders slump. I lost track of time. "Well, you are home now," she said, closing the heavy oak door behind me. The sound of the latch engaging was solid and final. "Come into the dining room. Your father has made some tea. We need to go over a few small things before we all turn in." My stomach tightened. "Can it wait, Maris? It has been a long day." "It will only take a moment." Gavin's voice boomed from the dining room. It was not a request. I followed Maris down the hallway. The house smelled of lemon polish and beeswax, the scent of aggressive cleanliness. In the dining room, the long mahogany table was bare except for a silver tea service and a stack of documents that sat in the exact center squarely in front of the chair pulled out for me. Gavin was standing by the sideboard, pouring himself a drink that was definitely not tea. The amber liquid swirled in the crystal glass. He looked at me, his face composed into a mask of solemn practicality. "Sit down, Scarlett," he said, gesturing to the chair. I sat. The wood was cold against my back. I looked at the papers. They were crisp, thick legal documents stapled neatly at the corners. Sticky notes in bright, cheerful yellow were attached to various pages with arrows pointing to signature lines. "What is this?" I asked, keeping my voice dull. "Just housekeeping," Gavin said, taking a sip of his drink. "Standard family paperwork. With Ruth gone, the estate enters a probate period that can freeze assets. It gets messy. Maris and I want to make sure everyone is protected." "Protected from what?" "From bureaucracy," Maris said, sliding into the seat next to me. She poured a cup of herbal tea and pushed it toward my hand. The steam rose in a thin, wavering line. "We are consolidating the family trust management, and since you are technically a beneficiary, we need to update your file to ensure there are no lapses in your coverage or access to funds." I looked down at the top document, General Durable Power of Attorney. Beneath that was a financial authorization form, and at the bottom, peeking out, was a document titled Advanced Health Care Directive and Consent to Treat. My heart skipped a beat. This was not estate paperwork. This was personal. "Why do you need power of attorney for me?" I asked, looking up at Gavin. "I am 33 years old. I manage my own finances. I live in Aurora, not here." "It is a contingency," Scarlett, Gavin said, his tone shifting to that condescending register he used when explaining taxes to me as a teenager. "If something happens to you, an accident, a sudden illness, we need the legal authority to step in and help you immediately. Without this, we would have to wait for a court order just to pay your mortgage or speak to your doctors." Maris tapped one of the yellow sticky notes with a manicured fingernail. "Just sign where we marked, sweetie. It saves you reading through 20 pages of legal jargon. It is boilerplate stuff. We just want to make sure you are safe." Safe. The word sounded like a threat. I reached for the healthcare directive, ignoring Maris's finger guiding me to the signature line. I flipped the page. The text was dense, single-spaced, intended to glaze the eyes of anyone reading it. But my job at the risk management firm, the one Gavin thought was a waste of my degree, involved reading fine print. I scanned the paragraphs, my eyes catching on keywords that made the hair on my arms stand up. Incapacity determination, authority to admit to residential facilities, psychiatric hold authorization. I stopped breathing for a second. I read the clause again. It stated that if two physicians determined I was incapacitated, and the definition of incapacitated was dangerously vague, including emotional distress, rendering the subject unable to make rational decisions, My designated agent could make all medical and lifestyle decisions for me, and the designated agent listed was Gavin Chapman. This clause, I said, pointing to the paragraph, it says you can commit me to a facility if you think I am emotionally unstable. Gavin chuckled, a dry rattling sound. Scarlett, do not be dramatic. That is standard language for comers or dementia. God forbid you get into a car wreck on that icy highway. But it does not say comer. I pressed, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts. It says emotional distress. Considering we just buried Grandma, I am currently in emotional distress. Does that mean you could sign me over to a clinic tomorrow? The room went silent. The air pressure seemed to drop. Maris stopped smiling. She leaned in closer, and the scent of her perfume, something cloying and floral, filled my nose. You are exhausted, Maris said softly. You are reading too much into it. We are your parents, Scarlett. We only want to have the tools to take care of you. She placed her hand on my shoulder through the fabric of my blouse. Her hand felt heavy and unnaturally cold, like a bag of frozen coins. Her fingers squeezed just a fraction too hard to be affectionate. Sign the papers, Scarlett, she whispered. Do it for your father. He is under so much stress right now. I looked at the pen lying on the table. It was long, heavy, and black. If I picked it up, if I put my name on those lines, I was signing away my autonomy. I was handing them the keys to my life. I cannot, I said, pushing the chair back. The legs scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. I am too tired to read this properly, and I am not signing anything I haven't read. I have a migraine. I need to sleep. Gavin's jaw tightened. A vein pulsed in his temple. We have the notary coming first thing in the morning. Scarlett, this needs to be done. Then I will read it at breakfast. I lied. I am going to bed. I turned and walked out of the room before they could stop me. I could feel their eyes boring into my back, 2 pairs of lasers burning holes through my coat. As I climbed the stairs, I passed my brother's room. The door was ajar. Owen was sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. He was 27, but in this house, he looked 17. He was wearing a rumpled dress shirt, his tie undone and hanging loosely around his neck. Owen, I whispered. He looked up, startled. His eyes were red-rimmed. Hey, Scar, is the yelling over? Nobody was yelling, I said, though the tension downstairs had been loud enough. Dad seemed mad, Owen mumbled, picking at a loose thread on his quilt. He told me to come up here and stay out of the way while they talked business with you. He said it was adult conversation. My heart broke for him. Owen was kind, artistic, and gentle, everything Gavin despised. Gavin had spent a lifetime chipping away at Owen's confidence until there was barely anything left but a nervous habit of apologizing for existing. It is okay, Owen, I said, stepping into the doorway but not fully entering. Just boring estate stuff. Get some sleep. Did you see the way Maris looked at the casket? Owen asked suddenly, his voice dropping to a whisper. She didn't look sad. She looked impatient. I stared at him. I had underestimated Owen. He was quiet, but he was watching. Go to sleep, Owen, I said softly, deciding not to pull him into the nightmare just yet. Not until I knew I could protect him. I went to my old bedroom at the end of the hall. It had been converted into a guest suite years ago, stripping away my posters and personality, replacing them with beige hotel-style decor. I closed the door and leaned against it. Exhaling a breath I felt like I had been holding since the cemetery. My eyes went to the lock on the doorknob. It was a simple privacy lock, the kind you could pop open with a paperclip if you tried hard enough. It offered zero real security. I remembered the last time I had visited Ruth about a month ago. She had been agitated, pacing around her small cottage in Louisville. I had found her changing the locks on her bedroom door, installing a heavy-duty deadbolt herself, her arthritic hands struggling with the screwdriver. "Grandma, what are you doing?" I had asked. She had looked at me with wild, terrified eyes. I lost my bank statements, Scarlett, and my medical file. They were in the desk, and now they are gone. I need a place that is mine, just mine. I had thought she was being senile. I had offered to make her tea. I had dismissed her fear as the confusion of old age. Guilt washed over me now, hot and acidic. She hadn't been confused. She had been under siege. Don't let them rush you, she had told me that day. gripping my wrist. When the time comes, they will come with papers and smiles. Don't let them rush you. I looked at the flimsy lock on my door. I turned the thumb turn. Click. It was a pathetic sound, but it was the only barrier I had. I moved to the window. The glass was cold down below. The patio lights were still on. I could see the reflection of the kitchen window on the snow. I needed water. My throat was parched, but the thought of going back downstairs, of running into Gavin or Maris, paralyzed me. I waited 1 hour, 2 hours. The house settled into silence. The lights downstairs were extinguished one by one, until only the security floodlights outside remained. At 1:00 in the morning, thirst won out. I opened my door with agonizing slowness, wincing as the hinges gave a faint squeak. I tiptoed down the hallway in my socks, avoiding the third step from the top because I remembered from childhood that it groaned. I reached the landing. The foyer was dark, but a faint light spilled from the kitchen at the back of the house. Voices low, hushed but distinct in the dead silence of the night. I pressed myself against the wall, inching closer to the kitchen doorway. She is stubborn, Gavin, just like her mother was. That was Maris. Her voice was devoid of the sweetness she used in public. It was hard, flat, businesslike. She is suspicious. Gavin's voice replied. She read the incapacity clause. I told you it was too aggressive to put that in the first round. We do not have time for a second round. Maris snapped the sound of silverware clinking against china. She was eating a midnight snack while plotting my demise. The trust holds the liquidity. Unless she signs that authorization, we cannot access the principal allocation to cover the rigorous debts. We have maybe 10 days before the bank starts asking questions about the collateral. I can pressure her, Gavin said. She craves approval. If I play the disappointed father, she will cave. And if she doesn't, Maris asked. There was a pause, a long stretching silence that made my skin crawl. If she doesn't, Gavin said, his voice dropping so low I had to strain to hear it. Then we moved to Plan B. The doctor's already on retainer. We just need a precipitating event, something that proves she's unstable, a breakdown. Make sure it happens before the weekend. Maris said, I want this done. I backed away. I moved as if I were underwater, terrified that the rustle of my clothes would give me away. I retreated up the stairs, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would bruise my ribs. I made it back to my room and closed the door. This time when I turned the lock, I used both hands, twisting it until it wouldn't go any further. I dragged a heavy armchair from the corner and wedged it under the doorknob. It was a childish barricade, something out of a movie, but I didn't care. They were talking about destroying me. They were talking about manufacturing a breakdown so they could steal my inheritance and cover their debts. Plan B wasn't a negotiation tactic. It was a medical kidnapping. I sat on the floor with my back against the chair, trembling. I reached into my bag and pulled out the cheap burner phone Miles's associate, the man with the scar, had given me before I left the warehouse. I powered it on. The screen glowed blue in the darkness. I typed a message to the number saved as, I am here. I want the truth. I hit send. Then I sat in the dark, watching the door, waiting for the monsters to come up the stairs. The house was no longer a home. It was a hunting ground, and I was the prey they had forgotten to kill before the sun went down. But they had made a mistake. They thought I was just Gavin's daughter. They didn't know I was Ruth's granddaughter, and I had just locked the door. The sun had barely dragged itself over the horizon when I pulled my car onto the quiet tree-lined street in Louisville, where my grandmother had lived for 40 years. It was a neighborhood of modest ranch-style houses and manicured lawns, a stark contrast to the sprawling cold estate my father owned in Aurora. Here, the fences were low and the neighbors knew which day you put your trash out. But today the silence on the street felt heavy, almost conspiratorial. I parked 2 streets over just in case Gavin or Maris had installed some kind of tracking application on my phone that I did not know about. I had left my primary phone in the car, buried under a pile of gym clothes, and walked the rest of the way with only the burner phone and a set of lockpicks I had never actually used for anything illegal before. Ruth's house looked exactly the same as it had a week ago, yet entirely different. The curtains were drawn tight. The morning newspaper was still sitting on the driveway, a damp gray roll of bad news. It looked like a house holding its breath. I let myself in through the back door. I still had my key, a brass copy she had given me when I went to college. The lock tumbled with a familiar smooth slide. Inside, the air was stale. It smelled of lavender, old paper, and the faint, lingering scent of the peppermint tea she drank by the gallon. It was the smell of my childhood, but today it made my chest ache with a sudden sharp pang of loss. I stood in the kitchen for a moment listening. The refrigerator hummed. The furnace clicked on in the basement. Otherwise, it was dead quiet. I did not have time to grieve. I had a job to do. I moved quickly to the master bedroom. This was the room Gavin had already tossed. According to his own estate management timeline, he claimed he had secured all the important documents, but Gavin did not know Ruth the way I did. He knew her as a mother he resented. I knew her as a conspirator. The bedroom was neat. The bed was made with military precision. The quilt pulled tight, but I noticed small things that were wrong. A stack of books on the nightstand was slightly askew. The rug was shifted an inch to the left. Gavin had been here looking for things of value. I went straight to the heavy oak desk in the corner. It was a massive piece of furniture, something from the 1950s, scarred with rings from coffee mugs and ink stains. The central drawer was locked. I tugged on it. It held fast. Gavin would have looked for a key in the obvious places: the top shelf of the closet, the jewelry box under the mattress. He would not have found it. I knelt down in front of the brick fireplace that took up the far wall of the bedroom. It was a quirky feature for a bedroom, but Ruth loved it. I ran my fingers along the hearth, counting 3 bricks in from the left, then 2 up to the naked eye. The mortar looked solid, but I knew that if you pressed the top right corner of that specific brick, it pivoted. It was a hiding spot she had shown me when I was 10 years old, a secret place where she used to hide emergency cash and chocolate bars she did not want the doctor to know about. I pressed the brick. It shifted with a grinding sound of stone on stone. I reached into the dark cavity. My fingers brushed against spider webs and then cold metal. I pulled out a small brass key tied to a piece of red ribbon. "Baku," I whispered. I went back to the desk and inserted the key. The lock clicked open with a satisfying snap. I pulled the drawer open, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was packed. Gavin had missed this because he did not know it existed. Or perhaps he thought he had already found everything in the filing cabinet in the study. This was the shadow archive. I started pulling things out, laying them on the quilt of the bed. There were bank statements, but not the ones Gavin had shown me. These were from a separate account at a credit union in Boulder, an account I had never heard of. I scanned the withdrawal lines. Large sums had been moved in the last 6 months, transferred to a trust account named the Cricket Initiative. Cricket, my nickname. She had been moving money out of Gavin's reach long before she died. Next was a stack of insurance papers, but clipped to them were handwritten notes in Ruth's distinct spidery script. Policy validates regardless of cause unless suicide. Check clause 14b. She had been studying her own life insurance. Why would an 81-year-old woman be worried about the suicide clause unless she feared someone might try to make her death look like one? But the most chilling item was a black leather-bound notebook. It was not a diary in the sentimental sense. It was a log. I opened it to a page dated 3 months ago, October 14th. Maris visited at 2 in the afternoon. Brought a green smoothie. Said it was for my joints. Tasted chalky. 20 minutes later. Vision blurred. Lost time. Woke up on the kitchen floor at 5. Maris was gone. Door unlocked. I flipped forward a few pages. November 2nd. Gavin and Maris for dinner. Maris insisted on making the tea. Earl Grey. But it smelled wrong. Bitter. I poured it into the plant pot when she went to the bathroom. The fern died 2 days later. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the book. This was not just suspicion. This was documentation. Ruth had been tracking her own poisoning. I turned to the entry from 3 weeks ago. The handwriting was shaky here, jagged, and pressed hard into the paper as if she were writing with angry desperation. They are getting impatient. I hear them whispering in the hall. Gavin says the debts are coming due. Maris says the dosage needs to be higher. I found white powder residue on the rim of my water glass this morning. I did not drink it. I scraped it into a sample bag. A sample bag. I looked back into the drawer tucked all away in the back. Rolled inside a pair of reading glasses was a small glass vial. It looked like something you would get from a pharmacy or a chemistry set. It was wrapped in tissue paper. I unwrapped it carefully. The vial contained a small amount of crystalline white powder. A piece of masking tape was stuck to the side, labeled in Ruth's handwriting, "Sample B Kitchen, November 12th." She had collected evidence against her own son. The realization made me feel sick, a heavy cold weight settling in my stomach. She knew they were killing her, and she had stayed in the house to catch them doing it. I picked up a sealed white envelope that had been sitting at the bottom of the drawer. On the front, written in thick black marker, were the words, "Scarlett, if you are reading this, do not drink anything you did not pour yourself." I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "My darling Cricket, if you have found this, then I am gone, and the lawyer Miles has done his job. I am sorry to leave you with this mess. I tried to shield you, but you need to know that the wolves are in the house. Gavin is weak, but Maris is dangerous. She has a background in pharmacology that she does not put on her resume. They need my money to cover a bad real estate deal Gavin made in Denver. They think I am senile. They think I do not see the powder in the drink or the pills crushed into the soup. I have hidden the digital proof. I recorded them. I knew they would try to challenge my mind to say I was crazy. The voice recorder is on a drive. Check the family portrait on the mantel. The one of us at the lake. Trust no one but Miles and watch your back. They will come for you next. Love her, Grandma." I stared at the letter, tears stinging my eyes. She had been fighting a war in this house all alone while I was busy with work in Aurora. Thinking she was just getting old and frail, I wiped my eyes roughly. I needed the drive. I ran out to the living room. The fireplace mantel was crowded with photos, but I knew the one she meant. It was a picture taken 20 years ago at Grand Lake. I was 13, grinning with braces, and Ruth was laughing, her gray hair blowing in the wind. It was the happiest I remembered her being. I grabbed the frame. It felt heavy. I turned it over. The backing was black velvet, held in place by small metal tabs. But in the bottom corner there was a piece of fresh clear Scotch tape that looked out of place against the dust of the velvet. I peeled the tape back underneath. Taped flat against the cardboard backing was a micro USB drive. It was so thin it was almost invisible. I pried it loose and clenched it in my fist. This was it. This was the voice of the dead. Suddenly, the silence of the house was shattered. The vibration against my hip made me jump so hard I nearly dropped the frame. It was my burner phone. Miles's associate had said nobody had this number. I pulled it out, my thumb hovering over the screen. It was a text message. My blood ran cold. The sender ID was blocked, but the message was unmistakable. "Where are you, honey? I am making tea. You should come home." It was Maris. How did she have this number? Then I realized I had left my car parked 2 streets away, but I had driven past the house on my way in. Or maybe they had put a tracker on my car itself, not just my old phone. Or maybe, just maybe, the safe phone Miles gave me was not as safe as I thought. But the text, "I am making tea," it was a taunt, a direct reference to the method they had used on Ruth. She was telling me she knew. She knew I was digging. She knew I was close. Panic flared in my chest, hot and bright. I looked around the silent living room. It suddenly felt like a trap. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch toward me. I grabbed the notebook, the bank statements, the vial, and the USB drive. I shoved them all into my large leather tote bag. It felt heavy, shifting with the weight of the evidence. I was carrying a bomb that could blow my family apart, and the fuse was already burning. I did not go out the back door. If she knew I was here, she might have someone watching the exits. I went to the basement door in the kitchen. Ruth had a storm cellar that opened out into the side yard, hidden by overgrown lilac bushes. It was a tight squeeze, and the latch was rusty, but it was the only way out that wasn't visible from the street. I scrambled down the wooden steps into the dark, musty basement. I found the storm doors and pushed up hard. They groaned, rust grinding against iron, but they gave way. I climbed out into the cold morning air, the branches of the lilac bush scratching my face. I stayed low, crouching behind the foliage, scanning the street. A black sedan was parked 3 houses down, facing Ruth's house. The windows were tinted dark, impenetrable. The engine was idling, a low, menacing rumble that drifted on the wind. It was not Gavin's car. It was not Maris's car. It was a car waiting for a target. I did not run. Running attracts attention. I walked quickly, keeping to the backyards, hopping low fences and cutting through gardens until I was 2 streets away. Back at my car, my hands were shaking so badly it took me 2 tries to get the key into the ignition. When the engine roared to life, I did not exhale. I threw the car into gear and drove, checking my rear view mirror every 3 seconds. The black sedan did not follow, but the text message burned in my pocket. I am making tea. I looked at the passenger seat where my bag sat. Inside was the jar of white powder and the journal detailing a murder. I was not just an observer anymore. I was the next course on the menu, and I had to make sure I did not swallow what they were serving. The office behind the black door was nothing like the hallway outside, where the corridor was a study in decay and neglect. This room was a fortress of organized chaos. Walls lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves dampened the sound of the world outside, creating a hushed library-like atmosphere that smelled of cedar and stale tobacco. A single green-shaded lamp on the desk cast a pool of light, leaving the corners of the room in deep shadow. Miles Harrington was sitting behind the desk, looking even more haggard than he had at the cemetery. He was nursing a tumbler of amber liquid, his hand trembling slightly as he set it down on a coaster. But he was not the one in charge here. The man who had opened the door, the man with the scar and the eyes of a tired wolf, was leaning against a filing cabinet, watching me. "Scarlett," Miles said, his voice raspy. "Close the door. Lock it." I did as I was told. The heavy deadbolt slid home with a sound that felt like sealing a vault. I walked to the desk and dropped my bag. It hit the wood with a heavy thud. "I found it," I said, my voice tight. "The notebook, the sample, the drive." Miles let out a long, shaky breath. "I knew she hid them well. I just prayed you were smart enough to find them. You did not introduce us." The man by the cabinet said. He pushed himself off the metal furniture and walked into the light. Up close, he looked even more formidable. His suit was well cut, but worn at the elbows. The uniform of a man who spent more time in stakeouts than in courtrooms. "Scarlett, this is called Wind," Miles said, gesturing with his glass. "He is a private investigator, licensed, bonded, and the only man in Colorado your grandmother trusted with her life." Caldor nodded at me. "M. Chapman, you had a busy morning running through backyards in Louisville. You were watching me?" I asked, a flash of anger cutting through my fear. "I was watching the house," Calder corrected. "I saw the black sedan, too. You did good getting out of there. Most people would have frozen." He reached for my bag, not asking for permission, and pulled out the vial I had found in the drawer. He held it up to the light, studying the white powder with a clinical detachment that made me shiver. "We have preliminary results from the sample Ruth gave me 2 weeks ago," Calder said. He placed a sheet of paper on the desk, sliding it across to me. I looked at the document. It was a toxicology report from a private lab in Denver. I saw lists of chemical compounds, numbers and percentages written out in plain text. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "The label on the bottle in your father's kitchen says it is a holistic heart support supplement," Calder said, his voice low and devoid of emotion. "It is supposed to be magnesium and cawthornberry. Harmless stuff, but the lab found something else." He tacked a line on the paper. "Dioxin," he said, "and a beta blocker. Both are heart medications used to control rhythm, but in high doses or combined with someone who already has a weak heart, it causes cardiac arrest." I finished, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "It mimics a heart attack." "Exactly," Calder said. "And since Ruth was 81 with a history of hypertension, no coroner would look twice. It is a clean kill." I felt the room spin. I gripped the edge of the desk. "Why didn't she go to the police?" If you knew, why didn't you stop them?" Miles slammed his hand down on the desk, startling me. "I tried. I begged her to let me file a report. I told her we had enough for a restraining order, at the very least." "Then why?" "Because she was a mother," Calder said softly. The words hung in the air, heavy and tragic. She did not want a scandal, Miles explained, his voice breaking. She kept saying, "I cannot let the family name be dragged through the mud. I cannot let Gavin go to prison unless I am 100% sure he is doing it on purpose." She wanted to believe it was an accident. She wanted to believe Maris was just incompetent, not malicious. She wanted to be wrong. Scarlett, she died hoping she was wrong. Calder reached for the USB drive I had placed on the desk. He plugged it into a laptop sitting open amidst the piles of legal briefs. She was wrong, Calder said, and by the end she knew it. He clicked a file. The speakers crackled, and then my grandmother's voice filled the room. It was weak, breathy, but unmistakable. November 10th, 7 in the evening. Maris brought me soup. It tasted metal like penance. I only ate 2 spoonfuls. Now my chest feels heavy. My arm is numb. I am locking the door. If I call Gavin, he will just say I am imagining things. He always says, "I am imagining things." There was a pause on the recording, just the sound of labored breathing. Then her voice came back stronger, filled with a sudden sharp clarity. She smiled when she gave it to me. She smiled. Calder stopped the recording. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt tears streaming down my face, hot and angry. I wiped them away furiously. "This is murder," I whispered. "This is cold-blooded murder." "It is," Miles agreed, "but proving it in a court of law against a defense team Gavin can hire with the estate money. That is the hard part. The body is buried. The evidence is circumstantial. They will say she was old, confused, paranoid. They will say she mixed up her own meds." Unless, Calder interjected, "we use the trap she set." "What trap?" I asked. Miles leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a sudden intensity. "This is the part Gavin and Maris do not know. This is the twist Ruth prepared." He pulled a thick file from a locked drawer in his desk. The cover simply read, "The Cricket Trust." "Ruth created a living trust 3 years ago," Miles said. "But it is not a standard trust. It has a trigger clause, a bad actor provision." "I don't understand," I said. "Normally, when a person dies, their will goes to probate," Miles explained using his lawyer voice. "Now assets are frozen, debts are paid, and then the heirs get their share. Gavin expects this. He expects to control everything as the executive until the distribution." But Miles continued, tapping the file. "Ruth moved the bulk of her liquid assets, stocks, bonds, the investment accounts into this trust, and the trust documents state that if her death is ruled suspicious, or if there is a formal investigation into her care, the assets do not go to Gavin." "Where do they go?" I asked. "They freeze," Miles said, "completely for 5 years, or until a court clears the beneficiaries of wrongdoing. And during that time, the sole trustee has full discretion to use those funds to pay for legal fees and investigations." "Who is the trustee?" "You are," Miles said. I stared at him. She bypassed Gavin entirely," Calder added. "She knew if she gave you the money directly, they would fight you. But if she made you the gatekeeper, you hold the keys to everything they want. That is why they are rushing you." Miles said, his face grave. "That paperwork they wanted you to sign the power of attorney. It wasn't just to control your health care. If you sign that, Gavin can legally act as you. He can resign your position as trustee on your behalf. He can dismantle the trust before it even activates. They know." I realized they know about the trust. "They suspect," Calder corrected. "Maris is smart. She knows Ruth was hiding money. She knows there is a roadblock coming. That is why they are desperate. They have debts. Scarlett, big ones. We found records of a failed development deal in Denver. Gavin owes nearly $2 million to private lenders who do not send polite letters. If he doesn't get Ruth's money within 30 days, he is a dead man walking. So he is killing his mother to pay a loan shark," I said, disgust curling in my stomach. "And he will run over you to get to the checkbook." Miles said, "Make no mistake. You are not his daughter right now. You are an obstacle." I paced the small room. The walls felt like they were closing in. "So what do we do?" "We have the sample. We have the recording. We take this to the police." "And say what?" Calder asked. "That you broke into a dead woman's house and stole a vial." that the recording is an old woman complaining about soup without an autopsy, which Gavin already blocked by cremating her. We have an uphill battle. Maris will claim the vial was planted. She will claim the recording was dementia. We need more. Miles said we need them to admit it, or we need to catch them in the act. Catch them? I looked from Miles to Calder. How? Calder stepped closer. Ruth suspected Maris was tampering with the food in the kitchen. So 2 days before she died, I went in while she was at the doctor's. I applied a clear UV reactive varnish to the seals of her spice jars and the medicine bottles, invisible to the naked eye. And yesterday during the funeral reception, Calder said, I managed to get a quick look at your father's kitchen with a UV light while I was posing as a caterer's assistant. The varnish from Ruth's medicine cabinet. It is all over the handle of the blender Maris uses. That connects Maris to the theft of the meds, I said, but it doesn't prove murder. No, Calder admitted, but it proves she had the weapon in her hand. Miles stood up. He walked around the desk and stood in front of me. He looked older than his years. A man burdened by a secret he had kept for a dying friend. Scarlett, listen to me carefully. Miles said, we are at a precipice. If you walk out that door and go back to Aurora, you can claim ignorance. You can sign their papers. Let them take the money and live your life. They won't hurt you if you give them what they want. You will be safe. You will be poorer, and they will get away with it. But you will be alive. He gestured to the black door. But if you stay, he continued, his voice dropping, if you choose to fight, there is no going back. They will come for you. They will try to destroy your reputation, your sanity, and maybe your life. Gavin is desperate, and Maris is a sociopath. This will not be a legal battle. It will be a war. I looked at the black door. It was solid, imposing. Beyond it lay the safety of submission. I could go home. I could forget the bitter taste of the tea, the whispered conversations, the cold eyes of my stepmother. I could be the beautiful daughter who mourned and moved on. Then I looked at the USB drive on the desk. I thought of Ruth alone in her house, terrified, writing in her notebook while her own son waited for her to die. I thought of the name she called me, Cricket. I thought of the text message I had received an hour ago. I am making tea. They were not just thieves. They were predators, and they had already decided I was prey. I looked up at Miles. Then I turned to Calder. I am not signing anything, I said. The fear was still there, churning in my gut. But something else was rising above it. A cold, hard rage. I didn't bury my grandmother just to let them bury me, I said. Calder's mouth curved into a grim approving smile. Good answer. What is the plan? I asked. We play their game. Calder said. They want you to be the unstable, emotional daughter. Fine. Be her. Go back to that house. Act erratic. Act scared. Make them think their plan is working. Make them think you are about to crack. Why? Because when predators think the prey is wounded, they get careless. Calder said. We need them to try it again on you. You want me to let them poison me? I asked, incredulous. No, Miles said quickly. We want them to try. We need to catch Maris in the act of preparing the dose. We need video. We need a chain of custody on the substance from the moment it leaves her hand to the moment we secure it. I will be watching, Calder promised. I will have eyes inside the house. I am installing cameras tomorrow while you keep them occupied. But you have to be the bait, Scarlett. You have to walk into that kitchen and let her pour the drink. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was exactly the kind of plan Ruth would have loved. One condition, I said. Name it. Miles said. Owen, I said. My brother. He is in that house. He is innocent. If things go bad, we get him out first. Agreed, Calder said. I reached out and picked up the USB drive. I put it in my pocket right next to the burner phone. Let's go, I said. I have a family dinner to attend. The black door opened and I stepped back out into the dark hallway. But this time, the darkness didn't feel like a threat. It felt like cover. I walked back into my father's house with a folder tucked under my arm and a performance prepared in my mind. The role was one I had rehearsed in the mirror of the law office bathroom. The defeated, grieving daughter who was too exhausted to fight. Miles Harrington had been brilliant. The documents inside the folder were masterpieces of legal mimicry. They had the right headers, the correct watermarks, and the heavy authoritative font that screams legitimacy. To the untrained eye, even to a desperate eye like Gavin's, they looked exactly like the irrevocable power of attorney and asset transfer authorization he had demanded. But Miles had buried a poison pill in the fine print. The jurisdiction clause cited a statute that had been repealed 18 months ago. It rendered the entire document void ab initio from the beginning. I could sign them in blood if I wanted to. They would not be worth the paper they were printed on. The house was quiet when I entered. It was the early afternoon. The sun was trying to push through the high, thin clouds, casting a pale light over the foyer. "Dad Maris," I called out, letting a tremor of fatigue slide into my voice. They appeared from the kitchen almost instantly, like actors waiting in the wings for their cue. Gavin looked hopeful, his eyes darting immediately to the folder under my arm. Maris was wiping her hands on a dish towel, her expression one of carefully calibrated concern. "Scarlett," Gavin said, stepping forward, "we thought you had gone back to Aurora." I almost did. I lied. I walked into the living room and sank onto the sofa, letting the folder rest on the coffee table. I drove halfway there, but I realized you were right. I cannot handle the administrative side of things right now. My head is pounding, and I just want to sleep for a week. I saw the look that passed between them. It was a flash of triumph, quick and sharp. "We only want to help, sweetheart," Maris said, coming around the sofa to sit beside me. She reached out and touched my forehead. Her hand was cool, but her skin felt dry and papery. "You do look pale. Have you been sleeping?" "Not really," I said. "I feel foggy dizzy." "That is grief," Maris said soothingly. But I saw her eyes narrow slightly, analyzing my pupils. She was checking her work. She wanted to know if the cumulative effect of whatever she had been slipping into my food over the weekend was taking hold. Stress does terrible things to the body. "I just want this over," I said, pushing the folder toward Gavin. "I brought my own copies. I printed them from the templates you sent me, but I filled in the dater. I am ready to sign. I just want to know that Grandma's affairs are handled so I don't have to think about lawyers." Gavin picked up the folder. He flipped through the pages, his hunger making him careless. He scanned the signature lines, checking for my name, but he did not read the dense paragraphs of legality. He was too arrogant to think I would counter-move. He thought he was playing chess with a child. "This looks in order," Gavin said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I can call the notary. She can be here in an hour." "Do it," I said. "But can we do something for me tonight, as a trade?" Gavin looked up wary. "What do you mean?" "I want a family dinner," I said. "A real one for Grandma. Just us and Owen. I want to cook her favorite roast, but I don't think I have the energy to manage the whole meal." "I will cook," Maris said immediately. It was a reflex. She needed control over the food. If I cooked, she couldn't introduce the additives. "You should rest. I will make Ruth's pot roast. I will take care of everything." "Thank you, Maris," I said, giving her a weak smile. That would mean a lot. The trap was set by 4 in the afternoon. The notary had come and gone. I had signed the useless papers with a flourish, watching Gavin tuck them into his safe with the reverence of a man securing the Holy Grail. He thought he had won. He thought the timer on his debt had stopped ticking. With the business concluded, the tension in the house shifted. Gavin became almost manic in his relief. Pouring himself a scotch and pacing the living room, Maris retreated to the kitchen to begin the preparations. I went upstairs to rest, but in reality I was coordinating the surveillance. While Gavin and Maris had been occupied with the notary in the study, a meeting I had insisted take place there to keep them contained. Calderwin had entered the house through the back patio door I had left unlocked. He was a ghost. He had been in and out of the kitchen in 7 minutes. I sat on my bed and opened the secure app on the burner phone. 2 new camera feeds appeared on the screen. The first was a wide shot of the kitchen taken from the top of the cabinets near the refrigerator. It covered the stove, the island, and the sink. The second view was terrifyingly intimate. It was a low-angle shot concealed within the decorative backsplash tiling behind the main prep counter. It provided a clear, head-in view of anyone's hands working on the cutting board or mixing drinks. I watched on the small screen as Maris moved around the kitchen. She was efficient. She chopped carrots and onions with rhythmic precision, but I wasn't watching the vegetables. I was watching the small cabinet above the spice rack, the one she had opened when she thought no one was looking. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Owen. "Are you okay? The vibe downstairs is weird. Dad is whistling. He never whistles." I stared at the message. Owen was 27, but he had spent his life being treated like furniture. He had learned to read the atmosphere in the house as a survival mechanism. He knew that Gavin's good moods were usually a precursor to something manipulative. I typed back, "Just stick with me tonight. Don't eat anything until we all sit down." "Why?" Owen replied instantly. "Is Maris trying to poison us with her kale obsession again?" He was joking. He had no idea how close to the truth he was. I decided not to terrify him yet. Owen was not a good liar. If he knew the full extent of the danger that his mother was likely murdered and his sister was being hunted, he would panic. His face would give it away and Gavin would shut down the dinner. "Just trust me," I wrote. "If I tell you to come to my room or leave the house, you do it immediately. No questions." There was a long pause. Then, "Okay, you're scaring me, Scar. But I thought fear keeps you awake." I put the phone away and went downstairs. I needed to be in the room. I needed to apply pressure. My job at Summit Lark Risk Solutions was often boring. I spent days auditing corporate supply chains, looking for breaks in protocol for phantom vendors for inventory that vanished into thin air. I traced intent through paperwork. But the core skill was understanding the chain of custody. If you want to prove a crime, you have to prove that the evidence never left the criminal's control until it entered yours. I walked into the kitchen. The smell of roasting meat and rosemary filled the air. It was sickeningly domestic. "It smells wonderful, Maris," I said, leaning against the door frame. Maris jumped slightly, then recovered. She was stirring a saucepan of gravy. "It will be ready in 20 minutes, she said, smiling. "How is your head?" "Still throbbing," I said. "I feel a bit nauseous." "I can make you something for that," she offered quickly. "I have some ginger tea or maybe something stronger. I have those herbal relaxants you like." "Maybe later," I said. "I want to try to eat first." I watched her hands. She was wearing an apron, but I saw the outline of something in her pocket. A small bottle, a packet. Gavin walked in, holding his glass. He was flushed, his tie loosened. "This feels like old times," he declared, clapping his hands together. The family gathered. Ruth would have liked this. The audacity of him using her name made my stomach turn. "She would," I agreed, my voice flat. She always said the family should stick together, especially when there are secrets. Gavin froze mid-sip. "What secrets?" "Oh, you know," I said, walking over to the island and picking up a carrot stick. "Recipes, stories, the things we inherit." I was pushing him. I wanted to see if he would crack. Gavin set his glass down a little too hard. "Speaking of inheritance, Scarlett, I was thinking once the funds are released, we should look into investing in that development project in Denver I told you about, Ridgerist. It is going to be a gold mine." He couldn't help himself. He had the money, or thought he did, and he was already spending it. "I thought Ridgerist was in debt," I said casually. The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was the bubbling of the gravy on the stove. Maris stopped stirring. She turned slowly to face me. "Where did you hear that?" Gavin asked, his voice dropping an octave. "Oh, just around," I said, shrugging. "I work in risk management, Dad. I hear things about local LLCs. I heard they were over-leveraged." "Rumors," Gavin snapped, his face rhianning. "Vicious rumors from competitors. The project is solid." He pulled his phone out of his pocket, his thumb flying across the screen. He was checking something or warning someone. "Put the phone away, Gavin," Maris said sharply. "We are having a family dinner." Gavin shoved the phone into his pocket, but he looked rattled. I had touched a nerve. Owen drifted into the kitchen then, looking like a lost puppy. He stood next to me, his shoulder brushing mine. "Hey," he murmured. "Hey," I said. I reached out and squeezed his hand. His palm was clammy. "Dinner is served," Maris announced. We moved to the dining room. The table was set with the good china. the set Ruth had given them as a wedding gift. It felt like a desecration. I sat across from Owen. Gavin took the head of the table. Maris sat opposite him. Maris brought out the roast, placing it in the center. Then she went back to the kitchen. I forgot the drinks. She called out. I glanced at my phone under the table. The feed from the hidden camera was live on the screen. I saw Maris standing at the counter. She had 4 glasses lined up. She filled 3 with red wine. For the 4th, she reached for the kettle. Then I saw it on the hide feed. Her hand dipped into her apron pocket. She pulled out a small dropper bottle, brown glass with no label. She unscrewed the cap. She hovered over the teacup. 1 drop, 2 drops, 3. She swirled the cup. She put the bottle back in her pocket. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought it would vibrate the table. I had it. I had the footage. She walked back into the dining room, carrying a tray. She placed a glass of wine in front of Gavin, 1 in front of Owen, and kept 1 for herself. Then she set the teacup in front of me. "Here you go, darling," she said, her voice tender. "Chamomile and peppermint. It will help you sleep tonight." The steam rose from the cup, carrying a faint, acrid scent that was masked by the peppermint. I looked at the cup. Then I looked at Maris. She was watching me. Her expression was expectant, eager. She wasn't just waiting for me to drink. She was waiting for me to disappear. "Thank you, Maris," I said. I lifted the cup. I brought it to my lips. I saw Gavin watching me from the end of the table. He wasn't drinking his wine. He was holding his breath. This was it, the moment of truth. I tilted the cup, letting the hot liquid touch my bottom lip, but I did not swallow. I let it burn there for a second, feeling the heat, feeling the proximity of death. "Actually," I said, setting the cup down with a sharp clink, "it is too hot. I will let it cool for a minute." Maris's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Don't let it get cold, Scarlet. The herbs work best when it is warm." "I won't," I promised. I looked at Owen. He was staring at the teacup, his brow furrowed. He had seen the way they were watching me. He was putting the pieces together. "Don't drink it." I willed him silently. "Just watch." I needed to secure the sample. I needed to get that liquid into a vial without them seeing. "So, Dad," I said, leaning forward, ignoring the poison sitting inches from my hand, "tell me more about this plan for the money. What exactly are we buying?" I needed to keep them talking. I needed them distracted because in my pocket I had a clean, empty syringe I had swiped from my medical kit, and I was just waiting for one moment of chaos to draw the weapon into the evidence bag. The game was no longer about hiding. It was about the strike, and I was ready to draw blood. The morning after the dinner, the house felt like a dormant volcano. The air was thick with unspoken agendas. Gavin was practically vibrating with AI's energy, clutching the folder of useless documents I had signed as if it were a winning lottery ticket. He believed he had won. He believed he now had the legal authority to strip mine my grandmother's legacy. I needed to use that arrogance against him. I needed the house empty. Calder had messaged me on the burner phone at 6:00 in the morning. "I need 30 minutes in the kitchen in the master bath. Get them out." It was a tall order, but I had the perfect leverage. "I think you should go to the bank and the county clerk today." I told Gavin over coffee. I kept my voice soft, submissive. "File the papers, get everything official so we can stop worrying about the probate court freezing the accounts. I will stay here and help." Owen sought through the garage. "It needs to be done before the estate appraisal." Gavin's eyes lit up. The suggestion aligned perfectly with his greed. "That is a sensible idea, Scarlet. Very sensible. We should strike while the iron is hot." "I will come with you, Gavin," Maris said, wiping the counter. "We can stop by the florist on the way back. I want to put fresh leaves on Ruth's grave, though," I urged. "I will handle lunch." They left at 9:00. As soon as the heavy front door clicked shut and the sound of Gavin's Mercedes faded down the driveway, I pulled out my phone. "Clear," I texted. Calder did not use the front door. He slipped in through the garage side entrance, which I had unlocked moments before. He was wearing gloves and carrying a small equipment bag. He moved with a silent, terrifying efficiency. "Kitchen first," he said, bypassing pleasantries. "Keep a lookout on the driveway." I stood by the window watching the street while Calder went to work. He didn't just look, he dissected the room. He went straight to the pantry, where Maris kept her health supplements. That's something, he called out softly after 5 minutes. I walked into the kitchen. Calder was holding a large white bottle labeled Organic Joint Support. It looked brand new. "Look at the seal," he said, holding it up to the light. I squinted. The foil seal over the mouth of the bottle looked intact, but along the rim there was a tiny jagged line of clear residue. "Superglue," Calder said. This seal was peeled back and then glued down again. Professional job, but hasty. The glue hadn't fully cured when she put the cap back on. There is a faint haze on the plastic. He carefully bagged the bottle. "I am taking this. We will match the contents against the sample you got from Ruth." "Check the trash," I said, remembering the receipt mentioned in the plan. Maris is meticulous, but she is arrogant. She thinks no one looks at the garbage. Calder pulled the main trash bag out of the bin. He didn't dump it. He sifted through it layer by layer. Near the bottom, buried inside a wet paper towel, was a crumpled slip of paper. He smoothed it out on the counter. It was a receipt from a medical supply store in Lakewood, a small shop called Vitality Medical, dated 4 days ago. Calder read. Items purchased: 2 glass droppers, 1 box of size 0 gelatin capsules. Empty. My blood ran cold. Empty capsules. To hide the taste, Calder said grimly. If the powder is bitter, like the dioxin, she puts it in a capsule. You swallow it thinking it is a vitamin, and the capsule dissolves in your stomach 10 minutes later. No taste, no warning. That is premeditated murder, I whispered. She is manufacturing poison pills in this kitchen. We have the receipt, Calder said, photographing it and then bagging it. This proves she bought the delivery system. Now we need to prove she used it. Go upstairs, I said. Check their bathroom. I need to look in Gavin's office. We split up. I went to the study, the room Gavin had claimed as his command center. The desk was cluttered with files. I started flipping through them, looking for anything related to the debts Miles had mentioned. I found something worse. Under a stack of sympathy cards was a thick document titled Purchase and Sale Agreement. It was for a 40-acre plot of land Ruth owned in the foothills. A beautiful piece of property she had intended to donate to a wildlife trust. The seller listed on the contract was a Ruth Chapman. It was Ridgerist Holdings LLC. The date on the contract was today. I snapped a picture of the document and sent it to Miles immediately. What is this? I typed. Miles replied within seconds. He is trying to transfer the title. He is using a shell company to move the asset out of Ruth's name before the trust locks him out. If he sells that land to himself to Ridgerist, he can flip it to a developer for $3 million, and the money vanishes into his offshore accounts. Can we stop him? I asked. Not yet. Miles wrote back. If we intervene now, we reveal we know about the fraud. We have to let him try to execute the deed. Once he files it with the county using a fraudulent authority, we have him for felony fraud. Let him hang himself. I heard the garage door rumble. They were back early. Calder. I hissed up the stairs. Calder appeared at the top of the landing. He didn't run. He moved with fluid speed. He vanished out the back door just as the key turned in the front lock. I sat down on the sofa and opened a book, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. Gavin and Maris walked in. They looked annoyed. Bureaucracy. Gavin spat, throwing his keys on the table. The clerk said the signature needs a witness affidavit because of the date. We have to go back tomorrow. Maris looked at me. Her eyes were sharp, assessing. She walked over and touched my shoulder. You look flushed. Scarlet, she said. Her voice had changed. The cloying sweetness was still there, but it was thinner, stretched over a core of steel. Are you feeling anxious? I am fine, I said, moving my shoulder away from her hand. Just reading. You were pacing. Maris said. I can tell the rogues are crooked. She was gaslighting me. She wanted me to doubt my own composure. I was not pacing, I said firmly. You have always been Hiram. Dear, Maris said, shaking her head with a pitying smile. Even as a child, you remember things differently than they happen. It is a symptom of grief, disassociation. We should keep an eye on that. I am not disassociating, I snapped. See, Gavin cut in, looking at me with fine concern. You are snapping at us. Irritable. Maybe you should lie down. Have you been taking the supplements Maris gave you? I took them. I lied. Good, Maris said. They take time to build up in your system. You just need to let go. Scarlett, stop trying to control everything. Your mind is playing tricks on you. I stood up. I am going to get some water. I walked to the kitchen, my hands shaking with rage. They were trying to paint me as unstable. They were laying the groundwork for the incapacity determination. If I fought back, it was aggression. If I cried, it was a breakdown. Owen came into the kitchen a few minutes later. He looked pale. Hey, he whispered, looking over his shoulder to make sure Gavin wasn't listening. Maris is on the phone in the sunroom. She sounds weird. Weird how? I asked. She is talking to that friend of hers. Owen said the doctor. Dr. Aris, I think that is his name. She was laughing about how easy the paperwork will be. I froze. Did she say anything else? She said, just have the signature ready. We will bring the patient to you by Friday. Owen looked at me, his eyes wide. Scarlett, who is the patient? Grandma is dead. I grabbed Owen's arm. Owen, listen to me. They are talking about me. But Owen recoiled. No, that is crazy. Is it? I asked intensely. You saw the papers yesterday. The clause about emotional incapacity. They want to declare me incompetent so they can take control of the trust. That is why Maris is saying I am imagining things. That is why she keeps asking if I am dizzy. Owen stared at me. He wanted to deny it. I could see the conflict in his face. But he had heard the call. He had seen the papers. Dr. Aries. Owen repeated. She has mentioned him before. She said he owes her a favor from when she worked at the hospital administration. I need to prove I am sane, I said, and I need to prove I am not on drugs. I pulled out my phone. I needed a paper trail that predated whatever fake diagnosis they were cooking up. I walked out to the patio, braving the cold air for privacy. I called my own doctor in Aurora. I need a full toxicology screen, I told the receptionist, and a psychiatric evaluation today. Immediate urgency. We are fully booked. MS. Chapman, the receptionist said. I will pay double the cash rate, I said, and I need the results sent to a lawyer, not to my home. This is a legal matter. I managed to secure an appointment for 4 in the afternoon at a satellite clinic in Boulder. I went back inside. I am going for a drive, I announced. I need fresh air. Do you think that is wise? Maris asked, blocking the hallway. You look unsteady. I am fine, I said, staring her down. Unless you are going to physically stop me. She stepped aside, her smile tight. Of course not. Drive safely. The roads are icy. I drove to the clinic. I gave blood. I gave urine. I sat through a 40-minute evaluation with a psychiatrist who confirmed that while I was grieving and stressed, I was fully oriented, rational, and displaying no signs of psychosis. Why do you need this? The doctor asked as he signed the form. Because my family is trying to commit me, I said. The doctor paused, looking at me with a mixture of pity and alarm. If you are in danger, I can call the police. Not yet, I said. I need them to make the move first. I just need this shield. I returned to the house at dusk. The atmosphere had shifted from tense to predatory. Gavin and Maris were drinking wine in the living room. They stopped talking the moment I walked in. I went up to my room and locked the door with the chair wedge again. I turned on the camera feed on my phone. The kitchen was empty, but then the audio picked up a sound. It was Gavin. He was not in the kitchen. He was in the hallway outside my door. I held my breath, listening to his heavy footsteps on the carpet. He was on the phone. I know, Gavin hissed. But the notary was a stickler. We are going back tomorrow. Of course. Yes, the certificate. I need it, Eris. I need it in my hand before the weekend. My heart hammered against my ribs. She is getting suspicious, Gavin continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that barely registered on the microphone I had hidden in the hallway plant earlier that day. She went out for 3 hours today. If she talks to anyone, we need to accelerate. Of course. No, Gavin said, and the cruelty in his voice made me nauseous. Do not worry about her resisting. By tomorrow night, she won't be in any condition to object. Maris is upping the dose. She will be a vegetable by the time we bring her to your office." I stared at the door. He was standing right there inches away, plotting my destruction. I looked at the burner phone. I had the receipt for the empty capsules. I had the tampered bottle. I had the recording of Ruth. And now I had Gavin confirming the timeline. By tomorrow night. I typed a message to Miles and Calder. "They are moving the timeline up. Tomorrow is the end game." Calder replied instantly. "We are ready. Let them set the table. We will be the ones to clear it." I lay down on the bed, fully clothed, clutching the phone. I wasn't going to sleep. I was counting down the hours until dinner. Tomorrow I would not just be a guest at their table. I would be the executioner of their greed. The tension in the house was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest like a leave vest. I had spent the night listening to the silence of the hallway, waiting for footsteps that never came. Gavin and Maris were biding their time, confident that their chemical warfare was slowly eroding my mind. They did not know that every time I feigned dizziness or stumbled on the stairs, I was merely following the script Coulterwin had written for me. The next morning, I claimed I needed to pick up the thank you cards for the funeral attendees. It was a mundane errand, the kind of dutiful granddaughter task that Gavin could not object to without looking suspicious. He let me go, but not before Maris pressed another cup of her special herbal tea into my hands. I poured it into the planter by the front door the moment the latch clicked shut. I drove 3M to a nondescript strip mall where Miles Harrington's Lincoln Town car was parked behind a dry cleaner. I slid into the passenger seat. Miles was behind the wheel looking grim. Calder was in the back, his presence filling the vehicle with a quiet intensity. "We do not have much time," Miles said, skipping the pleasantries. "Gavin called my office this morning. He is demanding the release of the estate assets. He claims you have signed the waivers." "I did," I said. "The fake ones." "He believes they are real," Miles said, "which means he is going to move fast. But before we get to the final act, you need to see this." Calder leaned forward and handed me a thick weathered manila envelope. It smelled of mildew and old secrets. "Ruth gave me this 3 years ago. Calder said she told me to open it only if the situation with Gavin became hostile." I opened the clasp. Inside was a birth certificate, but it was not Gavin's. It belonged to a baby boy named Thomas Miller, born 58 years ago in a charity ward in Denver. Beneath it was a decree of adoption, dated 2 years later, renaming the child Gavin Ruth Chapman. I stared at the paper, the letters swimming before my eyes. "He is not her son," I whispered. "Not biologically," Miles corrected. "Ruth and her husband adopted him when he was a toddler. They loved him, Scarlett. Do not doubt that they raised him as their own. But Gavin, he always had a darkness in him, a sense of entitlement that did not match his abilities." "Why does this matter now?" I asked, looking up. "Adopted children have the same rights as biological ones." "Usually, yes," Miles said. But Ruth knew Gavin's character. She knew he had gambled away his own opportunities and was waiting for her to die to replenish his coffers. So when she drafted the Cricket Trust, she included a specific lineage clause called her Tap the File. The trust is structured to protect the bloodline descendants in the event of a dispute. It explicitly defines the beneficiary hierarchy because Gavin is not biological and because the trust language is specific. If the bad actor clause is triggered, if we prove he is harming the estate or he is cut out completely, no statutory minimum, no legitimacy claim, he gets 0. The realization hit me like a slap. That is why they are terrified of the trust activating. "Exactly," Miles said. "If this goes to standard probate, Gavin can argue he is the son and heir. He can fight for a settlement, but if the trust locks down, he is a legal stranger to the money. He knows this. Maris knows this. So they need me to sign the power of attorney," I said, my voice rising. "So they can dismantle the trust before it ever takes effect. They are not just stealing from me. They are trying to erase Ruth's final wish." It explains the desperation. Calder said Maris isn't just greedy. She is panicked. If Gavin defaults on those debts to rigorist and has no inheritance to back him up, they are not just broke, they are dead. The people he borrowed from do not send collections agents. They send mechanics to cut brake lines. I sat back against the leather seat, processing the magnitude of the lie. My father wasn't just a bad businessman. He was a fraud who had spent his life resenting the woman who saved him simply because she hadn't given him the DNA to match his arrogance. There is one more thing, Miles said. He plugged his phone into the car's audio system. We found another file on the drive you recovered. Ruth's voice filled the car again. It was stronger this time, recorded perhaps months ago before the poisoning had weakened her. Scarlett, my love, if you are hearing this, things have gone wrong. I know Gavin. I know he will try to bully you. He will put papers in front of you and tell you it is for your own good. He might even threaten you. I have spoken to Miles. We have prepared a contingency. If they force you to sign the papers Miles gives you. They look real, but they are a shield. Do not fight them physically. Cricket, they are stronger than you. Outsmart them. Sign the papers and let them think they have won. It is the only way to make them lower their guard. Tears pricked my eyes. She had been playing three-dimensional chess while she was dying. She had foreseen the coercion. She had built the trap herself. I was just the one springing it. She knew, I whispered. She knew everything. She was a brilliant woman, Miles said softly. Now go back there. Finish it. I drove back to the house with a new understanding of the enemy. They weren't just evil. They were cornered animals. When I walked into the kitchen, Maris was waiting. She was arranging flowers in a vase, but her movements were jagged, aggressive. You were gone a long time, she said, not looking at me. The line at the stationery store was long, I said, keeping my tone dull. Maris turned, her eyes bored into mine. I saw a car parked down the street. A Lincoln. Who was that? My heart skipped a beat. She was watching harder than I thought. I didn't see a Lincoln, I lied smoothly. Maybe a neighbor. Do not lie to me, Scarlett. Maris said, her voice dropping to a hiss. She took a step closer. I know about that investigator. The one Miles hired. Called her when. I kept my face blank. I don't know who that is. Don't you? Maris sneered. A washed-up ex-cop who skulks around funerals. You think I don't run background checks on the people sniffing around my family? He is a fraud, Scarlett. He plants evidence to squeeze legal fees out of grieving families. If he is telling you things, wild stories about your father or me, he is lying. He is trying to isolate you. She was projecting. It was masterful. She was taking the truth and twisting it to make herself the victim. Nobody is telling me anything. I said, finding exhaustion. I just want to rest. Maris, why are you attacking me? I am protecting you, she snapped. You are vulnerable right now. You are imagining plots where there are none. First you think the tea tastes wrong. Now you are sneaking off to meet strange cars. You are spiraling, Scarlett, just like your mother did. It was a low blow. My mother had died of cancer, not mental illness, and Maris knew it, but she was trying to trigger me. She wanted a reaction she could show to Dr. Aries. See? She's hysterical. I swallowed the rage. I am going to find Owen, I said quietly. I found my brother in the garage staring at a wall of old tools Ruth had collected. He looked smaller than usual, his shoulders hunched. Owen, I said, closing the door behind me. He jumped. Geez, Scar, you scared me. We need to talk. I said, not here. Walk with me to the mailbox. We walked down the long driveway. The air was crisp and cold. When we were out of earshot of the house, I grabbed his arm. You asked me if Maris was weird. I said, you were right, but it is worse than weird. Owen, it is criminal. What are you talking about? He asked, his eyes wide. I can't tell you everything yet. I said, it is too dangerous for you to know the whole picture until tonight. But you need to know this Gavin isn't protecting us. He is broke. He is trying to steal the estate to pay off debts, and Maris is helping him. Steal. Owen scoffed nervously. It is his inheritance. Sar, it isn't, I said. Ruth left everything to a trust, and Gavin knows that if the trust activates, he gets nothing because legally he isn't her son. Owen stopped walking. He was adopted, I said, and Ruth's trust excludes non-blood relations in the event of foul play. That is why they are panting. That is why Maris is acting like a caged tiger. Owen looked at the house, then back at me. The denial in his face was wearing with the memories of a lifetime of Gavin's coldness and Maris's controlling nature. That explains why she never let him see the will, Owen murmured. She always kept it locked up. Owen, listen to me, I said, gripping his shoulders. Tonight is going to be bad. I am going to push them. I am going to make them show their hand. And when they do, I need you to be ready. Ready for what? To be a witness, I said, and to save my life. He looked terrified. Scarlett, let's just leave. Let's just get in the car and go. We can't, I said. If we leave, they win. They will destroy Ruth's memory, and they will get away with what they did to her. We have to finish this. I looked him dead in the eye. Do not drink anything Maris gives you tonight, I commanded. Do not eat anything unless you see me eat it first. And do not sign anything, no matter what Dad says. If I touch my left ear with my hand like this, you call 911. You don't ask why. You just call and say there is a medical emergency and a threat to life. Do you understand? Owen swallowed hard. He looked at the house, where the woman who had raised him was likely preparing a syringe in the kitchen. He looked at me, his sister, who had returned from the city with secrets and steel in her spine. He took a deep breath and nodded. Okay, he whispered. I am with you. Good, I said. Now put on your game face. We are going back in. We walked back toward the house. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody streaks across the sky. The black windows of the house looked like empty eyes watching our approach. I had the evidence. I had the team outside. I had my brother on the inside. All that was left was to walk into the trap and let it snap shut. The red and blue lights flashing against the living room curtains were the first sign that the war had shifted fronts. I had been upstairs in my room, reviewing the camera feeds on my burner phone when the heavy thud of a fist on the front door echoed through the house. My heart leaped into my throat, not out of guilt, but out of a sudden, chilling realization of what Maris was doing. She was weaponizing the state against me. I walked to the top of the stairs just as Gavin opened the door. 2 uniformed officers from the Boulder Police Department stood on the porch, their breath visible in the freezing night air. Good evening, the taller officer said, his hand resting casually near his belt. We received a call requesting a wellness check for a Scarlett Chapman. The caller stated there were concerns about self-harm and erratic behavior following a family tragedy. I froze. Maris walked into the foyer, clutching a handkerchief to her chest. She looked the picture of the distraught matriarch, her eyes wide with faint worry. Oh, thank goodness, you are here, she breathed, her voice trembling with a performance quality that would have garnered applause on Broadway. She has been locking herself in her room for hours. She was talking to herself earlier, screaming about conspiracies. We are just so terrified she might hurt herself. I descended the stairs slowly, my hand gripping the banister. My legs felt like lead, but I forced my spine straight. Calder's voice echoed in my head. Record label. I am Scarlett Chapman, I said. My voice was steady, cutting through Maris's theatrical sobbing. The officers looked up. They saw a woman dressed in jeans and a sweater, hair brushed, eyes clear. They did not see the hysterical, disheveled wreck Maris had described on the phone. Ma'am, the officer said, stepping inside. Your stepmother here is worried about you. She says you have been acting unstable. My grandmother was buried yesterday, I said, walking down to the foyer floor, keeping a safe distance from Maris. I am grieving, officer, but I am not unstable. I am not screaming, and I am certainly not hurting myself. Maris stepped forward, reaching for my arm. Scarlett, darling, do not lie to the police. You told me earlier you wanted to end it all. You were holding the sleeping pills. I pulled my arm back sharply. Do not touch me. I looked at the officer. I have never said that. This is a dispute over an estate. My father and his wife are attempting to establish a record of incapacity to override a trust. If you check the call log, I believe you will find I have been in my room reading a book for the last 2 hours. Gavin, who had been standing by the door looking like he wanted to melt into the floorboards, finally spoke. Officer, we just want her to get help. We are worried. I am her father. I just want to make sure she is safe. He was reciting the line. I could tell by the way his eyes fixed on a spot on the wall behind the officer's head. He was not looking at me. He could not look at me. I am perfectly safe, I said to the police. I have my own doctor in Aurora. I had a full physical and psychiatric evaluation this afternoon voluntarily. I can provide the contact information for the clinic if you need to verify my mental state." The officer's demeanor shifted. He looked from me calm, articulate, referencing medical records to Maris, who was wringing her hands a little too aggressively. "If she has seen a doctor today, ma'am," the officer said to Maris, "and she appears lucid now, there is not much we can do. We cannot force a hospitalization based on hearsay." Maris's face tightened. For a split second, the mask slipped and I saw the pure unadulterated venom beneath. "She is manipulating you. She is a danger." "I am fine, officer," I repeated. "Thank you for checking. You can leave now." The police left 5 minutes later, filing a report that would note subject appeared calm and oriented. It was a victory, but a small one. Maris had tried to have me dragged out in handcuffs, screaming, which would have been the perfect prelude to Gavin signing the incapacity papers. When the door closed, the silence in the foyer was deafening. "That was a low blow," I said, staring at Gavin. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm just worried about you, Scarlett. You are acting paranoid. Paranoia is a symptom of depression." "Stop it," I said. "Stop reading from the script Maris gave you." Maris turned on her heel and walked into the kitchen without a word. The air felt charged with static. They were escalating. The subtle poisoning wasn't working fast enough, so they were trying to brute force the narrative. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Miles. "Do not engage. Go to your room. But before you do, check the dining room table. Gavin left something there for you to find." I walked into the dining room. Sitting in the center of the table, illuminated by the chandelier, was a document I had never seen before. It was titled Will and Testament of Ruth Arne Chapman. I picked it up. My hands shook, not from fear, but from rage. The date on the signature page was November 10th, 2 days before she died. I scanned the contents. It was simple. It revoked all previous trusts and wills. It named Gavin Chapman as the sole beneficiary and executive. It left me a token amount, $5,000, and a collection of porcelain dolls I hated. But it was the signature that made my blood boil. It read Ruth Chapman, written in a shaky, jagged hand. But it was wrong. Ruth had severe arthritis in her right hand. Towards the end, she could barely grip a pen. When she did write, the letters were small and cramped. This signature was large, loopy, and trailed off at the end in a way she never did. It was a forgery and a bad one. "You found it," Gavin said. He was standing in the doorway holding a glass of scotch. He looked emboldened by the alcohol. "We found it in her bedside table this evening. She must have written it right before the end. She wanted to make things right. Scarlett. She wanted her son to have what was his." "This is fake," I said, holding up the paper. "Grandma couldn't hold a pen like this on November 10th. I was there that day. She couldn't even lift her teapot." "She had a moment of clarity," Gavin said, his voice hardening. "It is witnessed. See 2 witnesses." I looked at the names, Dr. Aries and Maris Chapman, "Her doctor and your wife." I said, "How convenient. No independent legal counsel, no notary. In Colorado, a holographic will or emergency will doesn't always need a notary if the intent is clear." Gavin said he was quoting law now, or what he thought was law. "It stands, Scarlett. The trust is void. We will see what a forensic handwriting analyst says about this," I said, dropping the paper back onto the table as if it were contaminated. "And we will see what the ink analysis says. If this was written 2 days ago, with a pen from this house, the chemical dating will prove it." Gavin powed. He hadn't thought about ink dating. He was an amateur playing a professional's game. "You are challenging your own grandmother's dying wish," he sputtered. "I am challenging a crime," I said. I turned to leave, but Maris was blocking the archway to the kitchen. She held a tray with a glass of water and a bottle of pills. "You are hysterical again," she said, her voice icy. "You need to take your anxiety medication, Dr. Ars prescribed these for you. He called them in this evening." "I am not taking anything from you," I said. Maris stepped forward. "Take the damn pills, Scarlett." She lunged, not to hit me, but to shove the tray at me. It was a calculated move. She collided with my shoulder. The tray tipped. The glass shattered on the hardwood floor. The bottle of pills flew open, scattering white capsules everywhere. "Look what you did!" Maris shrieked. "You are out of control. You are throwing things." She was staging a scene. If the police came back, or if she recorded audio, it would sound like I had attacked her. I did not apologize. I did not bend down to help clean it up. I pulled out my phone. I took a photo of the shattered glass. I took a photo of the pills scattered on the floor. Then I knelt down and picked up one of the capsules with the edge of a napkin, careful not to touch it with my skin. I folded the napkin around it and put it in my pocket. "I am keeping this," I said coldly, "for the lab." Maris stopped screaming. She stared at me, her chest heaving. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. She realized I wasn't playing the victim role correctly. I was collecting evidence. "You are sick," she spat. "No," I said. "I am just thorough." I walked past her, crunching over the broken glass. "Dr. Aris is coming tomorrow morning," Gavin called after me, his voice desperate. "He is coming to do a formal capacity evaluation. Since you won't go to him, he is coming here. It is for the estate. Scarlett, we cannot release funds until all beneficiaries are cleared." "I have my own doctor," I said without turning around. "If Aries steps foot in this house to examine me, I will have him reported to the medical board for conflict of interest. He is a witness on the will. Gavin, he cannot be the objective evaluator of the beneficiary. That is malpractice." I left them standing in the wreckage of their staged drama. I went to my room and barricaded the door again. My hands were trembling now. The adrenaline was crashing. They were coming at me from every angle, legal, medical, physical. The forged will was a desperate Hail Mary. It meant they knew the power of attorney scheme had failed. They were trying to bypass the trust entirely. I sat on the bed and texted Miles. "They produced a fake will dated Nov by Maris and Aries. I have a photo. Also secured a sample of the pills they tried to force on me." Miles replied, "Hold tight. The fake will is good news. It is a felony. If they file that with the probate court, they go to prison. They are panicking." A soft knock on my door made me jump. "Scarlett," it was Owen. I moved the chair and opened the door a crack. Owen slipped inside, looking pale and terrified. He was holding a can of soda unopened. "I brought you this," he whispered. "I got it from the garage fridge. I know nobody touched it." "Thank you," I said, cracking the tab. The sugar and caffeine were exactly what I needed. "I heard them," Owen said, sitting on the floor with his back to the wall. "In the kitchen after you came upstairs. What did they say?" "Maris was yelling at Dad," Owen said, his voice shaking. "She said you are too smart. She said the wellness check backfired." He paused, taking a breath. "And then she said, if she doesn't drink it voluntarily, we have to make it look like she did. We have to make it look like an overdose tonight." My blood turned to ice. "An overdose?" I repeated. "She said, Doctor, Aries will sign the death certificate." Owen continued, tears welling in his eyes. "She said he is in too deep to refuse. They want to say you killed yourself out of grief. Then the trust doesn't matter. If you are dead, the money goes to the next of kin. That is Dad. They were trying to commit me anymore. They were going to kill me." The realization brought a strange, cold clarity. The game of cat and mouse was over. This was survival. "Okay," I said. "Okay, we have to leave." Owen said, "We have to climb out the window right now." "No," I said. "If we run, they destroy the evidence. They burn the house down if they have to. They will say I started the fire and died in it. We can't give them that chance." I looked at the burner phone. The camera feed showed the kitchen. Maris was there. She was crushing pills with a mortar and pestle. She was mixing them into a glass of warm milk. "She is making it now," I said. I turned to Owen. "Go back to your room. Lock the door. Do not come out until you hear me scream. And when you hear me scream, you call 911 and you run downstairs and open the front door for the police." "You want them to catch her?" Owen asked. "I want them to catch her standing over the body," I said grimly. "Or what they think is the body. Scarlett, that is crazy. It is the only way to put them away for life." I said, "I have the antidote in my bag. I have the emetic. Calder gave me a protocol. I am not going to die." Owen, but I am going to make them think I am dying long enough to get a confession. I pushed him toward the door. Go. And remember, the signal is the scream. Owen looked at me one last time, terror and awe mixing on his face, and then he slipped out into the hallway. I waited. I watched the screen. Maris finished mixing the milk. She wiped the rim of the glass. She put it on a tray. She was coming upstairs. I took a deep breath. I checked the syringe of charcoal solution Calder had given me, the break glass in case of emergency item. I tucked it under my pillow. I unlocked the door. I lay down on the bed and pulled the covers up. I was the bait and the shark was swimming up the stairs. The air in the house was not just heavy, it was pressurized. It felt as if the oxygen had been sucked out and replaced with a volatile gas that only needed a single spark to ignite. I woke up with the grim determination of a soldier walking onto a battlefield where the terrain was familiar, but the mines had been moved. Today was the day I would force their hand. Today was the day I would turn their slow, creeping poison into a sudden, undeniable crime. I started the morning by breaking the rules of their isolation game. I did not hide in my room. I did not feign weakness. Instead, I walked downstairs at 8:00 in the morning, dressed in sharp business attire, and picked up the landline in the kitchen right in front of Gavin. I dialed Mrs. Gable, the neighbor, 3 houses down. She was a nosy, well-meaning woman who had played bridge with Ruth for 20 years. Mrs. Gable, I said, my voice bright and loud enough for Gavin to hear over his coffee. It is Scarlett. Yes, I am still here. Listen, we are having a small memorial dinner tonight. Just something intimate to honor Grandma. I know how much she loved you. I would love for you and Mr. Gable to come. 700. Wonderful. I hung up and turned to see Gavin staring at me. His face was a mask of pale shock. What are you doing? He asked, his voice tight. We are not in any condition for guests. We are grieving Dad, I said, pouring myself a glass of tap water, the only safe liquid in the house. Grief should be shared. Besides, I want people to see how well you and Maris are taking care of me. It will stop the rumors, won't it? I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Maris walked in, then, tying the sash of her silk robe. She looked at Gavin, then at me. She sensed the shift in power immediately. Guests, she asked, her eyes narrowing. Mrs. Gable and her husband, I said, and maybe the Thompsons. I thought a roast would be nice. Or maybe just soup. You are so good at making soup, Maris. I let the taunt hang in the air for a second before dropping the real amble. I figured we should have a nice evening, I continued, leaning against the counter, because tomorrow is going to be a busy business day. I am going to the bank first thing in the morning. The silence that followed was absolute. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. The bank Gavin squeaked. Yes, I said. I am going to meet with the branch manager at First National. I want to inquire about the Cricket Trust. I want to see the activation protocols myself. If everything is as straightforward as you say, Dad, there shouldn't be any issue with me asking a few questions, right? I saw the color drain from Maris's face. She knew. She knew that if I walked into that bank and spoke to a trustee officer, the incapacity play would be dead in the water. I would establish myself as competent, active, and suspicious. The bank would lock the accounts pending an investigation. You are not well enough to go to the bank, Maris said, her voice low. I feel great, I lied. In fact, I haven't felt this clear-headed in days. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving them with the ticking clock of their own financial ruin. I spent the rest of the morning in my room. I was not idle. I was coordinating with the team. Guest confirmed for 7. I texted Calder. The stage is set. I have adjusted the camera feeds. Calder replied. I zoomed the backsplash camera in tight. I am focused entirely on the prep station and the island. If she uses the dropper, I will see the pause on her hand. Filings are drafted. Miles messaged the moment. We have the video evidence of the dosing. I am filing for an emergency injunction to freeze all assets and an ex parte order for protection. We just need the act. The trap was simple, but brutal by inviting the neighbors. I had removed Maris's ability to use physical force or violent coercion. She could not scream at me or drag me to a car while Mrs. Gable was eating potato salad. She had to be the perfect hostess. This meant she had only one option left to stop me from going to the bank. She had to drug me right there at the dinner table. She had to make me pass out in front of witnesses, likely attributing it to exhaustion or grief, and then have Dr. Aries whisk me away before I woke up. It was a high-risk move for her, but I had given her no choice. The day dragged on. I could feel the tension radiating from the master bedroom down the hall. I heard fierce, hushed arguments. I heard Gavin pacing. At 5:00 in the afternoon, Owen knocked on my door. He looked sick. I recorded them. He whispered, holding up his phone. His hand was shaking so hard the phone vibrated. "Play it," I said. He pressed play. The audio was slightly muffled. He must have been standing outside their door, but the voices were distinct. "You have to stop this, Maris." Gavin's voice was pleading, bordering on hysterical. "We cannot do this with the neighbors there. It is too risky. Let her go to the bank. We can fight it later." "There is no later, you idiot." Maris's voice cut through the recording like a whip. "If she walks into that bank tomorrow, the rigorous deal collapses by noon. The loan sharks will be at your office by 2. Do you want them to break your legs, Gavin, or do you want them to come for me? I can ask for an extension." "You have had 3 extensions," Maris screamed in a whisper. "I am not going to prison for debt fraud because you are too weak to handle your daughter. I am going to finish this tonight. I am going to give her the cocktail. She will be out cold by dessert. We tell the neighbors she fainted from stress. We call Aris. He takes her to his clinic for observation. By the time she wakes up, she will have a documented history of psychosis, and we will have the power of attorney." "Maris, please shut up, Gavin, unless you want me to tell everyone about the gambling debts. Do you want me to tell Owen that his college fund went to a blackjack table in Vegas?" The recording ended. I looked at Owen. He was staring at the floor, tears streaming down his face. The revelation about his college fund, about the extent of Gavin's betrayal, had shattered whatever remained of his loyalty. "He knew," Owen whispered. "He knew she was going to drug you, and he's letting her do it because he is scared of a bookie." "He is a coward, Owen," I said gently, "and cowards are dangerous. But this recording, this is the nail in the coffin. This proves conspiracy. Gavin isn't a bystander. He is an accomplice." "What do I do?" Owen asked. "You go downstairs," I said. "You greet the neighbors. You smile, and you watch Maris. If she hands me a drink, you do not intervene. You let me take it, but I am not going to drink it." I promised. "I have a plan. Just trust me." 7:00 arrived. The doorbell rang. I walked down the stairs, smoothing my skirt. I felt a strange sense of calm. This was the performance of a lifetime. Mrs. Gable and her husband were standing in the foyer holding a casserole dish. "Scarlett, dear Mrs. Gable exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that smelled of lavender and potpourri. "We were so devastated about Ruth. How are you holding up day by day?" "Mrs. Gable," I said, stepping back, "thank you for coming." Maris appeared from the kitchen. She was wearing a high-necked black dress, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked impeccable. The breathing daughter-in-law. "Martha, Bill," she said, taking the casserole dish. "You are so kind. Please come in. Gavin is pouring wine." We moved into the dining room. Gavin was there, pouring a Merlot with a hand that trembled slightly. He avoided my eyes. He greeted the neighbors with a boisterousness that felt forced and brittle. The dinner was a surreal exercise in hypocrisy. We ate roast chicken and talked about Ruth's garden, her charity work, her love of old movies. Mrs. Gable told stories about their bridge games. "Ruth always had such a sharp mind," Mrs. Gable said, buttering a roll, "right up to the end. I saw her 3 days before she passed. She was telling me about this new investment she was looking into." Gavin choked on his wine. "Yes, well," he coughed. "She had her good days and her bad days. She seemed perfectly fine to me." Mrs. Gable insisted. I watched Maris. She wasn't eating. She was watching the clock. "Who is ready for coffee?" Maris asked when the plates were cleared. "Or tea, Scarlett? I know you like your herbal blend in the evening." "That sounds lovely, Maris," I said. Thank you. She stood up and went to the kitchen. I glanced at Owen. He was gripping his napkin so tight his knuckles were white. I looked at my watch. It was 8:15. I pictured Calder in the van outside staring at the monitor. He would be seeing Maris at the island now. He would see her reach into her pocket. He would see the dropper. This was the pressure cooker. She had to do it now. If she didn't, I walked free in the morning. Minutes ticked by. The conversation at the table lulled. Then Maris returned. She carried a silver tray with 4 coffee cups and 1 delicate china teacup. She walked around the table serving the guests first, then Gavin, then Owen. Finally, she stood behind me. Here you go, Scarlett, she said softly. Chamomile with honey, just the way you like it. She placed the cup in front of me. The liquid was dark, steaming. It smelled sweet. Too sweet. Thank you, Maris, I said. I looked at the cup. This was it. The evidence I needed was in that liquid. But I couldn't just pour it into a vial in front of Mrs. Gibble. I had to be smarter. Actually, I said, lifting the cup, a toast to Grandma. Everyone raised their glasses. Mrs. Gable raised her coffee. Gavin raised his wine, his hand shaking violently now. To Ruth, Gavin mumbled. To Ruth, I said. I brought the cup to my lips. I tilted it. I felt the warm liquid touch my bottom lip. I opened my mouth slightly, letting a small amount flow in, but I did not swallow. I held the liquid under my tongue, controlling the reflex to gulp. I lowered the cup. I made a show of savoring it. Delicious, I said. Maris smiled. It was a smile of pure relief. She thought she had won. She thought the clock was ticking down to my unconsciousness. Excuse me, I said, standing up. I just need to use the restroom. Are you okay? Maris asked, hope flaring in her eyes. Feeling dizzy. Just a little, I said, playing the part. I will be right back. I walked out of the dining room, keeping my steps steady. I entered the powder room in the hallway and locked the door. Immediately, I pulled a small sterile sample jar from my pocket. I spat the mouthful of tea into the jar and sealed it tight. Then I pulled out a small syringe of Ipecac syrup I had hidden in my bra, a backup plan in case I had accidentally swallowed some. But I hadn't. I was safe. However, I needed to sell the narrative. I flushed the toilet. I splashed water on my face to look clammy. I texted Calder sample secured. It is done. Then I walked back out. I stood in the hallway for a moment. To my left was the dining room where my father and his wife were waiting for me to collapse. To my right was the kitchen, the scene of the crime. I looked at the kitchen door. It was painted white, but in my mind it was black. It was the same dark door I had walked through at the warehouse. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't the scared granddaughter. I was the operator. I walked back into the dining room. I swayed slightly on purpose. Scarlett, Mrs. Gable asked, concerned. I slurred my words slightly. I feel very tired. Maris stood up, triumph radiating from her like heat. Oh dear, I told you that you were overdoing it. Come, let's get you to the sofa. She reached for me. This was the moment. The camera was recording. The witnesses were watching. The trap had snapped shut, but they were the ones inside it. I let my eyes roll back slightly. I let my knees buckle. But as Maris caught me, pulling me into a suffocating embrace that was meant to look like comfort, I wasn't falling into darkness. I was stepping into the light of the truth. Call doctor. Eyes. Maris barked at Gavin. Tell him she is having an episode. Go ahead, I thought as I let my body go limp in her arms. Call him. Call the police. Call the devil himself. You are only digging the hole deeper. The feint I had staged in the dining room worked exactly as intended, but not in the way Maris had hoped. I allowed myself to be guided to the sofa in the living room, my body limp, my eyes fluttering. I could feel the tension radiating off Maris like heat from a pavement in July. She was furious that I was not yet unconscious, merely woozy. She needed me kamiamaus before doctors arrived to sign the commitment papers. She's just in shock, Maris told Mrs. Gable, her voice tight and high. Please, just give us a moment. Maybe we should call an ambulance, Mrs. Gable suggested, her voice trembling. She was clutching her purse, looking between me and the untouched casserole on the table. No, Gavin and Maris shouted in unison. Gavin cleared his throat, trying to lower his volume. "No need for that, Martha. We have a family doctor coming. He knows her history." I let out a low moan and sat up slowly, pressing a hand to my forehead. I needed to reset the stage. I needed Maris back in the kitchen one last time. "I am sorry," I whispered, blinking rapidly to simulate confusion. I felt so dizzy. "I think I just need something warm. My hands are freezing." I held up my hands. They were shaking violently, a tremor I was manufacturing with every ounce of muscle control I possessed. "The tea," I stammered. I dropped it. I spilled it. Maris looked at the dining room table where the cup sat, half empty. I hadn't actually spilled it, but in the chaos of my collapse it had sloshed onto the saucer. To her, that explained why the drug hadn't taken full effect yet. I hadn't ingested the full dose. "I will make you another one," Maris said instantly. "A fresh cup stronger. It will help you sleep, Scarlett." "Thank you, Maris," I said, my voice weak. "You are so good to me." She turned and marched toward the kitchen. She was impatient now, careless. I leaned back against the cushions. "Dad, can you get me a blanket?" I asked. Gavin looked at me, then at the kitchen, then back at me. He looked like a man standing on a trap door that was about to open. "Sure," he mumbled. "Sure, honey." He walked toward the hallway closet, but he paused at the kitchen door. He didn't go in. He just stood there watching his wife. I slipped my phone out from under my leg where I had hidden it. I tapped the screen. The feed from the backsplash camera was live and crystal clear. In the kitchen, Maris was moving with frantic speed. She didn't bother to block the view of the island this time. She assumed the neighbors were in the living room and I was incapacitated on the sofa on the small screen. I saw her hand reach into her pocket. She pulled out the brown dropper bottle. She didn't count the drops this time. She squeezed the bulb hard, shooting a stream of clear liquid into the steaming mug of water. Then the camera caught the movement in the doorway. Gavin, he was standing there watching her. He saw the bottle. He saw the dosage. He saw his wife preparing a lethal cocktail for his daughter. "Make it strong," Gavin whispered. The microphone picked it up. It was faint, but it was there. Maris turned to him, her eyes cold. "Go sit with her. Keep the old bat Gable distracted. If she asks questions, tell her Scarlett has a history of seizures." Gavin nodded and turned away. I felt a piece of my heart turn to stone. I had suspected he was involved. I had known he was weak. But seeing him watch the poison go into the cup and then give the order to make it strong, that was the end of Gavin Chapman as my father. He was just a defendant now. I slipped the phone onto the coffee table, face up. I looked at Owen, who was standing by the fireplace. He was pale, sweating. He had seen me check the phone. He knew. I gave him a tiny nod. "Get ready." Maris swept back into the room, the new cup in her hand. She was smiling, but it was a rich of tension. "Here we are," she cooped. "Drink this down, sweetheart. All of it." She held the cup out to me. The steam rose, carrying the invisible promise of oblivion. I reached out. My hand was shaking so much that when my fingers brushed the saucer, the cup rattled loudly. "Careful." Maris hissed, her patience snapping. She grabbed my wrist to steady it, forcing the cup toward my mouth. "Just drink it." "I can't," I whimpered. "It smells funny." "It is just honey," Maris said through gritted teeth. "Drink it, Mrs." Gable stood up. "Maris, maybe you should let her rest." "You are forcing her." "Sit down, Martha," Gavin snapped. The room went dead silent. "Mrs." Gable froze. I stopped shaking. I sat up straight. I pulled my wrist out of Maris's grip with a sudden sharp strength that made her stumble back. I set the cup down on the coffee table with a deliberate clink. "I am not going to drink that, Maris," I said. My voice was no longer weak. It was clear, cold, and steady, because I know what is in it. Maris blinked, confused by the sudden shift. "What are you talking about?" "You are delirious." And I reached for my phone on the table. Owen locked the front door. Owen moved instantly. He bolted to the door and turned with a deadbolt. "What is going on?" Gavin demanded, stepping forward. "Owen, unlock that door." "Stay back, Dad," Owen said, his voice trembling but defiant. "Just stay back." I tapped the screen of my phone. I didn't play the video of the kitchen. Not yet. I played the file I had found in the picture frame. Ruth's voice, frail but undeniable, filled the living room. If you are hearing this, it means they have started. I know Gavin. I know he will try to bully you. He will put papers in front of you if they force you to sign. Sign the papers Miles gives you. Gavin's face turned the color of ash. He recognized the voice. He recognized the condemnation from the grave. The recording continued. Maris is dangerous. She has a background in pharmacology. I found white powder residue on the rim of my water glass this morning. Mrs. Gable gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Maris stared at the phone, her eyes wide with horror. She lunged. Give me that, she shrieked, diving across the coffee table, her fingernails hooked like talons. Owen, I shouted. Owen didn't hesitate. He tackled Maris from the side, knocking her away from me. They crashed into the armchair. It wasn't a graceful fight. It was a desperate scramble of limbs, but Owen, fueled by a lifetime of suppression, pinned her arms to her sides. Call them. Owen yelled at me. I didn't have to. The front door exploded inward with a deafening crash. The lock Owen had just turned splintered as the battering ram hit it. Police. Everybody down. Get down. Uniformed officers swarmed the hallway, their weapons drawn. Behind them, looking grim and satisfied, were Miles, Harrington, and Calder. Secure the kitchen, Calder shouted, pointing a gloved finger. The evidence is on the island. The cup is on the table, Mrs. Gable screamed and dove behind the sofa. Gavin stood in the center of the room, his hands raised, looking like a man who had forgotten how to breathe. It wasn't me, Gavin yelled, pointing a shaking finger at his wife, who was currently being handcuffed by a female officer. It was her idea. She made me do it. I tried to stop her. You liar. Maris screamed back, thrashing against the cuffs. You begged me to fix the debt. You told me to make it strong. I have the texts, Gavin. I kept every text. That is enough. A sergeant barked. Separate them. Read them their rights. Calder walked over to the coffee table. He pulled a pair of sterile gloves from his pocket and carefully picked up the teacup Maris had tried to force down my throat. He sealed it in an evidence bag. Dioxin and sedative cocktail, Calder said, looking at me. We will have the lab confirm it by morning, but with the video of her pouring it, it is a slam dunk. I stood up. My legs were steady now. I looked at Gavin. He was being led away, weeping, begging the officers to understand that he was a victim of circumstance. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. Miles walked over to me. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Are you all right, Scarlett? I am alive, I said. That is what matters. The house was a flurry of activity for the next 2 hours. Technicians in white suits were photographing the kitchen, the pantry, and the broken glass from the night before. Mrs. Gable gave a statement, still shaking, confirming everything she had seen and heard when the house was finally quiet, stripped of its monsters. Miles gathered Owen and me in the kitchen. There is one last thing you need to know, Miles said. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a document. The trust, I said. Yes, Miles said, but also the finances. He looked at the empty space where Gavin had stood. Gavin thought he was killing his mother for millions, Miles said. But Ruth was 3 steps ahead. She liquidated the main investment account 6 months ago. Art, Owen asked. Where did the money go? She bought an annuity, Miles explained. A non-refundable, non-transferable annuity in your names, Scarlett and Owen. It pays out a modest stipend for life starting next year. But the bulk of the estate, the land, the house, he smiled, a dry, thin smile. She donated the land to the state of Colorado for a wildlife preserve. The paperwork was filed the day before she died. And this house, it belongs to the Cricket Trust now. I started to laugh. It started as a chuckle and turned into a sob. He killed her for nothing. I said he committed murder for an empty bank account. Greed makes people blind. Miles said Ruth knew that. She knew. He would never check the public filings until it was too late. I walked out of the house. The night air was cold, biting against my skin, but it felt clean. It didn't smell of old lavender or bitter almonds. It smelled of snow and pine. I drove to Ruth's house in Louisville. Owen followed me in his car. I stood on the porch, the heavy brass key in my hand. This was my house now. The trust had designated it as a safe harbor from me and Owen. I put the key in the lock. It turned smoothly. I pushed the door open. The darkness inside wasn't scary anymore. It was just an empty room waiting for light. I walked in and turned on the lamp by the door. The warm yellow glow illuminated the old armchair where Ruth used to sit, the shelves of books, the photos of us on the mantel. I walked over to the fireplace. I touched the photo of us at Grand Lake. "We got them, Grandma," I whispered. "We got them." I wasn't the victim. I wasn't the prey. I was the granddaughter of Ruth Chapman, and I had survived the family business. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So, please drop a comment below with your location and let's share our thoughts on this family's dark secrets. Don't forget to subscribe to Azad Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people. Thanks to all.